Welcome to the ICU podcast, where we explore the vestibular experience through conversations between patients and the health professionals who care for them.
During this podcast, we invite patients to share their stories and healthcare professionals to ask questions so they are equipped to better care for and truly see the invisible challenges faced by their patients. I'm Kimberly Warner.
And I'm Cynthia Ryan, and we are your hosts on this journey of discovery. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the ICU podcast. Today, we're going to launch ourselves into the year-end holidays, which are probably the busiest time of year for social events. Family gatherings and work parties, special church services, and cocktail parties with friends. These are all meant to be fun and festive, a time to eat, drink, and be merry, as the saying goes. But events can often be overwhelming for people with vestibular disorders. The bright lights and lots of people talking loudly and all at once, it can really take part of the joy out of the season while you're also trying to take care of yourself. So today we're going to talk with a professional event planner whose job it is to make large, busy events inclusive, as well as a vestibular patient who has developed a strategy for being able to enjoy her family gatherings. Kimberly, do you want to go ahead and introduce Carol?
Yeah, this is going to be a really fun conversation. So I don't know if I've ever spoken with an event planner before. But first I want to introduce Carol Rexroad Cannon. She lives with her husband, Robert, in Hendersonville, North Carolina. They worked together as United Methodist pastors for 35 years before retiring in 2021. Carol was struck with severe vertigo due to vestibular neuritis in 2016, which has since developed into PPPD. Vestibular rehab therapy has helped to restore her balance, and Carol now enjoys hiking mountain trails near her home, visiting the family, and volunteering in the church and community to work for justice, peace, and wholeness. Sounds lovely, Carol. I'm so happy to have you here.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
And I get to introduce Erica LaDusa, who has over 20 years of event planning experience, 9 of those as the owner of LDS Events, an event planning company that focuses solely on supporting nonprofit organizations like VITA. Erica was actually the event organizer for our first ever Life for Balance Live conference. Erica also works as a fundraising consultant with Minneapolis-based Fladbow Advancement, and she lives in Edina, Minnesota with her husband and 2 daughters. She loves to travel, volunteer, and spend time at their family cabin in Wisconsin. Erica, did I say that right? Wisconsin?
You did. You can give it a little bit more Wisconsin if you want.
Yeah, let's plug your nose a little.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. Thanks for having me today. Glad to be here.
Cynthia, if you really want to get it right, I'm assuming, Erica, your cabin is up north.
Up north. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, up north.
Oh.
It's a special part of the country over here.
It really is. Oh my gosh, I love it there. Okay, well, let's jump right in. Carol, we usually like to start with just a background on vestibular journeys. So I know you have one. Let's hear a little bit about that.
Well, my vestibular journey began on August 24th, 2016. I'd gotten up early in the morning at 5 o'clock for my early morning bathroom run, and the room was spinning. And I said, maybe this is vertigo. I've heard people talk about it. So I got up my iPad, looked it up, and then the world started spinning more. And I said, yeah, this is vertigo, but I went on to the bathroom. And about 10 minutes later, I called out to my husband and said, Robert, bring me a bowl, because I had nausea and I needed a bowl. And he called our family doctor. She called a prescription of meclizine. But I don't remember much of the rest of the morning, except that I was nauseated, the world was spinning, and by noon, I could barely crawl. I could not even crawl to the commode to throw up. So we called the family doctor back, and she said, try meclizine again, but then go ahead and go to the ER. So we headed up to the ER. We were up there for 4 hours or 5 hours or I don't know how long we were there. Finally, they saw us, and it was too late for them to run an MRI. So they had to keep us overnight. And that ended up being a true blessing because the physical therapist on that floor was a vestibular rehab specialist.
Wow.
So she recognized part of what my issues were, and she tried the BPV or the Epler maneuver. Mm-hmm. It didn't work, so she started me on the gaze stabilization exercises.
Wow.
And the other thing she did is she said, check out Vita at vestibular.org. So within a week of the onset of my vertigo, I had connected with Vita, which was really great. Some other issues showed up in the hospital, but we won't go into all of those. But after I was discharged, I had a follow-up visit with my family doctor, and she referred me back to the vestibular rehab specialist I met in a town 45 minutes away. And there she ran some tests and recognized I had vestibular neuritis. And so she continued with all sorts of exercises and had me progressing week by week with the gaze stabilization exercises, getting increasingly more complicated, and having me do them every week at home. I did this for 12 weeks. And by the end of the 12 weeks, I was able to walk around the church without my hiking poles. I'd been using hiking poles from the get-go to walk, because when I was discharged from the hospital, in fact, I was using a walker, but quickly figured out hiking poles were better. And I could drive again, and that was wonderful. But I still had sensory overload. Crowds bothered me. Bright lights, ceiling fans upset me. Loud noises would disturb me. Even the odors from the kitchen bothered me. I couldn't concentrate for more than an hour. And especially I had trouble with fatigue. Every afternoon I had to take a nap for an hour or so. So I asked my physical therapist, the vestibular rehab specialist, about that. And she says, oh, I don't know what that is. It's not vestibular related. Yeah. And so she recommended I go see a neurologist. So over the next 5 months, I saw 2 different neurologists. They did all sorts of tests, blood tests, everything. And neither one of them was vestibular trained. Ugh. And neither of them recognized that it was vestibular related. Boy. And so the second one was going to refer me to a rheumatologist because tiredness, fatigue was an issue. And they'd already ruled out autoimmune diseases, but maybe the rheumatologist could help. And my husband and I talked about it. And we said that a better use of our time and energy was just to manage my symptoms than to run up and down the hospital chasing a new doctor. And we did fine with that. For 3 months, we were doing fine. And our church was great. They cooperated with us, supported me. It was great. And then after 3 months, we went to our nephew's wedding in Brooklyn, New York. And that was a whole new environment. And I did fine through the wedding. But the reception just overwhelmed me. The walk from the church to the reception side, and it just overwhelmed me to the point that I sobbed in the middle of the reception hall for 10 minutes uncontrollably. Oh. My children still remember that. Well, we all still remember that. And that incident and a few others on the trip convinced me it was trying again to try to find a specialist. And there were two things I wanted to look for. One is I wanted a vestibular specialist. And two, since only a physical therapist had helped me, I was looking for a physical therapist. I just didn't trust MDs at that point. That's changed, but that was that point. And so I went to Vita's website and looked up, find a clinician, and I found Dr. Richard Clendaniel. He was 5-hour drive because I lived in rural South Carolina. So I was looking anywhere in the Southeast. It was a 5-hour drive, but I made an appointment. And he did an even more extensive vestibular exam and recognized that I had 3PD. And that year, 2017, was the first year that diagnosis was in the World Health Organization.
Wow.
So that timing was just, again, a blessing. It was just phenomenal.
Mm.
And he gave me an additional exercise to do that was tailored for me. And he also recommended increasing my Celexa, which was an anti-anxiety medicine that I was taking. And so did that, and I managed well. He having a diagnosis really made a difference for me.
Yeah.
Because I realized then that my brain was having to work differently. It was having to work harder because of the damage to my vestibular nerve.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that allowed me to give myself more grace. It helped me understand, yes, the nap is necessary. Your brain is tired. And so my husband and I worked together to manage my symptoms for the next 4 years as we worked together. And then we retired 3 years ago, and we've continued to manage my symptoms. So that's a little bit of my journey.
That's a great story, Carol.
And you're so articulate. I mean, that was just an incredible. I mean, my heart was beating. You were describing, I was excited in the beginning that you got that diagnosis, or the actual assessment so early in the ER, and then those darn neurologists that all do was read the first couple pages of Vita's website, and they would have known that your symptoms were vestibular. Anyway.
Yeah, that's. I mean, we know that that's one of the problems is that there's no one vestibular specialty, and so you have to have a multidisciplinary team who all are involved in, diagnosing and treating vestibular disorders. So
the other thing interesting there is the neurologist was at the same facility where Dr. Rezik was just beginning his work. And so she could have just referred me to the building next door, but because she didn't recognize.
Right. Oh, what a bummer that is.
It worked out.
So for those of you who are listening, Dr. Rizik is Dr. Habib Rizik. He's a amazing neurologist and also the president of Vita's board of directors with the Medical University of South Carolina, and another great example of finding the right specialist and building referral networks within local communities. So thank you for sharing that. Well, we're gonna. You've already started talking about your experience at events before you learned to, to control to what you needed to do to experience an event and be able to control your symptoms. But we're going to get back to that because I want to hear, Erica, how did you get talking about events? How did you get into organizing events?
Yeah.
And I'm going to ask that, but I'm also going to say that you are such a wonderful event organizer. You're perfect for your job. So it's a lucky thing for all of us that you did find that calling.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you so much. And Carol, thanks for sharing your story. What a journey. I can't even imagine how you were feeling through that very long process. So I'm glad that you've obviously found some specialists to help you, but I honestly, I can't even imagine. So thank you for sharing that with all of us. But as for me, and appreciate the lovely kudos, Cynthia, I actually got into event planning. It started in the that fateful career resource lab when I was going to the University of Wisconsin Eau Claire. I started out as a pre-med major, and that did not work out very well and last very long. Chemistry was not a strong suit of mine. And so I actually visited the career resource lab, and the counselor I was working with asked me, well, okay, pre-med wasn't working. What do you like to do? And I said, I like to plan parties. And he said, that's not a job. And I said, I'm going to make it. So fast forward 25 years. And now it's an actual college degree, and so it's been interesting, kind of watching it morph into that for a lot of people. But when I first started out, I was asked to go into more of a hospitality role, and interestingly enough, I was a wedding coordinator for 12 years, so I understand well of what Carol is having to deal with in that wedding reception. But then after being a wedding planner for about 10 years or so, I was tired of having all of my weekends hijacked. And so I, about 11 years ago, started my own event consulting and event planning business that focused in on nonprofits and nonprofit galas and fundraising events. And I realized it's what I should have been doing for a very, very long time. So it's been amazing. I feel so fortunate every day when I sometimes roll tiredly out of bed that this is my job. Sometimes I have to pinch myself because it's been an amazing journey, and I absolutely adore helping nonprofit organizations. So
I love that
That's
you
great.
pre-med, and that you're able to actually kind of bring some of that medical into your event planning now with your vestibular patients. So it came back around.
Yeah, I don't think we ever some people do end up in the job that they thought that they were going to in high school and college, but I think majority of the time it is a journey. I was pre-vet. I thought I was going to be a veterinarian.
Yeah.
And look at me now.
And I was pre-med as well, and I actually did 2 years of medical school, but look at me now.
I was a chemistry major.
Oh, here we go.
I needed you, Carol, back in 1996.
I was preaching.
Well, we all ended up where we were meant to be.
I think so.
Yeah. So, Carol, you mentioned that you went to your son's wedding, was it? Your daughter's
Nephews.
wedding? Your nephew's wedding, and that sounds like the first place where you were like, whoa.
No, there were others before that.
There were others. When was the first time you started noticing this sort of sensory overload?
2 weeks after being released from the hospital, we had a meeting at the church. It had been planned for several months because we were having a consultant come in to help the personnel committee consider what we need to have in a youth counselor, a youth director. And the chairperson was young and vivacious and energetic and talkative. And she was going miles an hour all the way through the meeting. And about an hour into the meeting, I tried to make some comments to say, it's an hour, we need to wrap this up. And she didn't read my cues. And finally, I just became overwhelmed. The color literally drained from my face. And I bolted from the room and went to a sofa down at the end of the hall. Well, I wasn't there very long before another member of the committee came down to check on me, partly because he also wanted to leave the meeting because it was getting overwhelming for him too, but not as badly. But that was the first time that I really realized just how meetings were going to be difficult for me. And what I learned at that point was that part of it was because it was crowded. And so I learned afterwards it was better for me to sit towards the back of a room or on the side, because that way I didn't feel crowded. I mean, sometimes I'd sit 2 feet behind everybody else. I could participate. So that was one of the things. And also meetings were hard because it required concentration. And that also taxed my brain. But since then, I've learned that I also need to recognize when I'm starting to feel bad and then leave, rather than bolt from the room or have a breakdown in the middle and sob, to excuse myself, or not even just slide out. And so that's one of the things that I've learned through these years.
I think, it's funny that you say that, because our topic was started out being about holiday events, but it's not just holiday events that can be overwhelming. And I think that almost everybody who's listening here can totally relate to being in a meeting, whether it's, and it happens whether you're in an in-person meeting or a Zoom meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of stimulus in our world today. A lot. Perhaps more than our brains have evolved to handle. So I think the vestibular patients maybe are the canaries in the coal mine, but I don't think that this is an uncommon thing. And it's awful, because what it ends up making us do is isolate. And until we develop tools or have diagnoses and treatments and things that we can do to manage and cope.
Yeah. So, Erica, you were saying that you could totally relate to the wedding that that Carol was talking about. When was it that you first realized that you had to make accommodations for people with invisible special needs? I'll call them, not specifically vestibular necessarily. When you were planning events, weddings, and the corporate events, nonprofit events.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's interesting because honestly, accommodations have always been a part of events. But it's always been more things like dietary requirements, or creating access for folks who perhaps use a wheelchair, for instance. So I think those accommodations always been there, but it's really come to light, I would feel, maybe in the last 7 to 8 years, where the event world has really started to take some notice that in order to create events for everyone and for everyone to really enjoy them, we need to make them as inclusive as possible, and not just wait for these requests to come to light, for us to instead stop and think, okay, what does this environment look like for people with varying abilities or varying needs? And I think, like you were saying, there's just so much stimulus out there right now, and we're really seeing so many things change, where programs, for instance, when it comes to either events or galas or corporate programs, they're just getting shorter, because I think everybody has gotten a shorter attention span. We all have a terrible attention span now, thanks to COVID. And so I think, right there, that's one of those pieces where hopefully that is a change that the entire event industry is making, and is only going to then benefit those, for instance, with vestibular disorders, because what used to be an hour-long program, because somehow that was the norm, has now started to get consolidated into 20 minutes or half an hour, which I think is just advantageous for everybody. So it's always been there, but it for sure, I feel like, has kind of hit the gas pedal to start making accommodations much more quickly than we used to.
I remember a mutual acquaintance of ours, Jim Hainlin, who you organized an event for and has sponsored our Life for Balance Live conference for several years. He was sharing with me about a theater, I believe it was, in Minneapolis that has specific days that they opened for people with sensory. They have the same show that they've been hosting for everyone else, but they have that show specifically for people with sensory sensitivities, and some of the accommodations include dimmer lighting and a calm room that they can go to for if they do become overwhelmed during the show. And I'm trying to remember anything else.
I think it's just quieter in general. The noise level is just in general brought down a little bit, so it's just not quite as in your face and in your ears. So yes, we're very lucky to have something like that. And it seems like an easy one, right? It seems like an easy one that a lot of cities could and theaters could adopt. That would really be a nice inclusive
Mm-hmm.
route to go.
And
Is that the Guthrie or where is it?
You know, a lot of our movie theaters do it up here. I've noticed because when you go in and do that, and then I do believe it is the Guthrie that has sensory. I believe our orchestra hall has sensory performances too. So I think it probably started with the Guthrie, which is our main theater, one of our main theater companies up here. But it's kind of, I think everybody kind of grabbed onto that and said, "Oh, that's a great idea. We should all do that." So, yeah,
and I think that we can all learn from that in planning family gatherings too. I mean, family gatherings, there is planning that goes into it, and you certainly can communicate with people in advance of a gathering to let them know things like, if you're planning it and other people are coming, I'm going to, there's going to be dim lighting. I'm not going to be playing music in the background. I think one of the most challenging things, and this is challenging for me too, but I know this from my mother who has vestibular problems and hearing loss, is when you have many groups of people talking. There's just this.
Oh yeah.
I don't know how to describe it, but it's so difficult to, not only is it difficult to concentrate on one conversation, but it's exhausting to push back and ignore all of that external noise.
Yes.
Yeah, Carol, you actually wrote a blog post for Vita about this. You kind of developed a little checklist for planning family holiday gatherings. Do you want to share some of those points that you?
Sure. This was in 2021, after COVID, and it was the first time that our family was coming together. And at this point, it was a small family gathering. I've got other experiences with a larger one, but this is a small. It was just our immediate family. Um, and the first thing is to remember Ben Franklin's adage: guests like fish smell after 3 days. Because our family was coming from all sorts of places, and so we wanted to see each other. But that way we limited people to 3 nights, and that made it more manageable for me. We planned the menu ahead of time, and so that we knew what we wanted, and those things that we could make ahead of time, we made ahead of time. We've got 2 family cranberry relishes. You can make them and put them in the refrigerator. So we did things like that. Thing that was very important for me was to let go of some of my responsibilities. In the words of my husband, stay out of the kitchen. I wanted to help and be involved, and fortunately my husband and my 2 daughters and our son-in-law enjoy being in the kitchen, and so I just stay out. And I had to learn. I tried to be helpful and even tried to wash dishes occasionally, and even that would be overwhelming for me, and they just said, stay out completely. And letting go of those responsibilities was important for me. Another thing is those things that you do to help manage your vestibular disorder, keep on doing. And for me, that means I still need to take my nap. No matter what was happening, take my nap. And that was important. And again, like I said earlier, being prepared to retreat if need be, in whatever ways it is. One time at the Thanksgiving table, son-in-law and the other daughter was getting into a heated argument. Now, it was about physics, not about the election, but they were having a heated, and I was just getting overwhelmed. And so finally I just left, and I felt like I was banished to the bedroom, and they were the ones that were getting the argument, but I always felt like I was banished. But then I learned I can choose to leave, to retreat before I'm getting too overwhelmed. And that way, it's a difference feeling I'm choosing to retreat rather than being pushed away. But the other thing is, since then, I've taken a little bit more vestibular rehab therapy, and part of it was learning to center myself. And so one way to retreat can simply be to close my eyes and take a few deep breaths. And so I don't have to leave the room, or I can make sure my feet are firmly planted, I'm firmly grounded in the chair. And that's another way to retreat, to center myself, but still be in the room. Another thing that we've done is, as the family's grown larger, we've added 2 grandchildren. And so we've ended up renting a motel room so that whoever needs to retreat, whether it's the introverted daughter that needs to spend the night away from everybody, or whether it's me during my nap, it's not that far away. But that's another way that we've learned to manage the 3PD. And the most important thing is to acknowledge and accept that I can't do everything that I want to do. Mm-hmm. That means, while everybody else is going for a walk, I may need to take advantage of the quiet and be by myself. Or when the family's playing a board game, I can watch. I mean, these are family gatherings, but the importance of the family gatherings is to enjoy one another, to give thanks, and to build memories. And we want those memories to be pleasant, not full of tension. And so that's another thing that I've learned from them.
Those are such words of wisdom, Carol. I love how you ended that, and I can totally relate to so many of the things you said. I admit to being the hostess with the mostess, and I have a very difficult time letting go of that control and letting other people do things. And part of it is letting go of the outcome. It doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
You know, that it is whatever it is, and like you said, if you and I was talking with another vestibular patient who says that she has, by the time she gets to where she's overwhelmed, she can't communicate.
Yeah.
So she has to have a system and some signs to give to her husband to let him know what's going on. Not expecting him to be keeping an eye on her, but so that she can, if she can't say I'm overwhelmed, she can just, say the safe word or get up and go, tap him on the shoulder, whatever it is.
Exactly. I do the same thing. Or sometimes he'll look at me and say, you need to leave.
Yeah, communicate with one person at that party that you need to sort of have a little bit of a, even if they're not going to go home with you, but just somebody that can help you check in with yourself, because sometimes the stimulus can just get out of hand really quickly, and then you get excited, and then 15 minutes later you're overwhelmed and you don't even know how it happened.
Yes.
Just have somebody that can just kind of have your back, and go, is this good for you? Do you want to take a walk? All that. I mean,
and I think that people are willing to do that. I think it's hard to ask for help, but people want to help. And It actually makes them feel good that you felt like you could trust them to help you. So, yeah. So, speaking of checklists, Erica, do you have a checklist of things that you consider when you are planning for an event to make it both accessible and inclusive?
Absolutely, I do. And Carol, I love hearing about your family. I love hearing about having a hotel room nearby. I think that is brilliant. I feel like I'm going to take that one on, because somebody always needs an app at an event, right? I think that's a really smart tip. So, and absolutely, I think, some of the things that you were already talking about in your checklist, I mean, honestly, are kind of on my checklist as well. And so I think, you've really zeroed in on a few components that I think I personally, as an event planner, have started to try to take more notice to, because of course it's really important to plan ahead, like you said, so everyone really at the event is feeling welcome, is feeling comfortable, is feeling like they have an out if they need to. it's, when it comes to being at an event or something where there's information being presented, we want to make sure everybody can understand what's being presented. And then of course we want everybody to participate. It's to the best of their ability and what they're comfortable doing. Like you said, Carol, in some cases, it makes the most sense for you to take a chair that's a few feet away or to sit in the back. And so I think, really some of the high level pieces with those meetings and with that type of thing that as an event planner we've started to look at is, let's make sure we have captioning on our programs and videos. That up until, a few years back wasn't just a standard, but now luckily technology steps in. And I think on a lot of Apple products, you usually just hit a toggle and it'll close caption for you. Obviously, Google and all of the ones, it's so easy to close caption that, it's kind of a no brainer. And so that's a big one. Or, should we add interpreters to our programming? And of course, from an inclusive standpoint, that can be, somebody who's using, ASL. That could be somebody who's obviously translating for a different language. So those kind of pieces have really started to creep up on the important list. And I love that you mentioned quiet and calm spaces. That's becoming much more a norm to make sure that every event has a spot or a place that somebody who does need to retreat or does need all of a sudden, less bright lights or less flashing videos. Of course, events are great, and you think of some of the events that you've seen on TV, and there is strobe, and there is lighting, and there's pyrotechnics, and there's, I was just at don't tell anyone because I told you I'm from Wisconsin, but I was at a Vikings game yesterday. Kills me a little bit, but I was watching. It's funny because as an event planner, I'm not a huge, what I like to call, sports ball fan. I love to go to the games to actually see everything else that's happening to it. In fact, it was so fun. We had field passes yesterday to go down and like where all the players are, so you can kind of greet the players. Everyone else in my group was like looking at the players. I'm like over here watching. I'm like, who's running the fireworks? Who's running the snow? Who's running the video? Who's running? I was so intrigued. I'm like, I don't care about the football players. But those kind of things, those types of events are just from a person that doesn't have a vestibular disorder is overwhelming. There's smoke, there's, strobes, there's fake snow falling from the sky. And so to kind of consider how we need to be making changes like that is really at the forefront, I think, of looking at these differently. And then at the end of the day, so many organizations have also stuck with hybrid, which I think is really fascinating, and really such an amazing option for so many events. Obviously it's something that, we knew of before COVID, and then we hit COVID, and, it was our norm in life. And I think a lot of organizations said, this is really something that works out well for a wide variety of reasons. And so a lot of nonprofits and other companies have obviously stuck with it. And I think it's here to stay just for that same reason.
Yeah, I think so. We were just organizing Vita's annual board retreat, and so many. When I was checking in with people, we do have a location where some of us are going, but it is a hybrid event. Mm-hmm. So when I was checking with people to see if they would be able to come, there were several, patients who are on our board who said, I'm just not comfortable flying yet. Or, I would need to build in a day before and a day after to recover. And I don't have time for that.
I think the hybrid events have been helpful for the chronic illness community in general. And I've working with unfixed patients for the last 5 years. I've found that, some people that have felt so isolated in their lives are now able to engage socially frequently. And at the same time, vestibular patients have the unique challenge of screens. And so there is, for myself, 2 years I was off screens, period. And so that it's a little bit of a catch-22 because it can offer some benefits, but it can also, once again, be a little isolating. I remember turning the screen way down and laying on the floor and just listening at times. But it's nice to acknowledge that, I think, for specifically vestibular patients, because they want to be seen and they don't want to be like, oh, great, thanks for including us, because I can't do that either. But I know that the isolation and the challenges of social situations can really, really be hard on us emotionally. And I'm just wondering, Carol, do you have any words of wisdom for anyone that's feeling like they've thrown in the towel on social gatherings?
I think the first thing is be gentle on yourself. Just give yourself some grace. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, if there's some event that you want to go to, that you really feel, it's a Christmas party in the neighborhood, maybe. It's a small thing, but to say, why do I want to go? What's my purpose in going? Maybe it's simply just to get out. It's a way to step out a little bit. Now, that's a possible way. Or maybe it's a way to stretch your boundaries. You've done one thing, but now you want to do something a little bit, stretches you a little bit. So that might be the reason you want to go. Or maybe there's one or two people that you haven't seen that you want to see at the event. Or maybe it's go just to have fun, whatever that would mean today. But think about, you may have your own reasons, but think about, what is your purpose for going? And then when you know what your purpose is, you can feel a better sense of accomplishment if you do it. If it's just simply to try it, if you stay there 10 minutes, you've succeeded.
Mm-hmm.
Or if it's, I want to see my neighbor Sue, whom I haven't seen for a while. Then if you go and you speak to her and one other person, you leave. You haven't met everybody around the room, but you've accomplished what you wanted to. So having your purpose in mind really makes a difference. And again, it's okay to be a wallflower at these events. You don't have to work the room. You can just sit in a corner and let people come see you. And the people that care enough to see you will seek you out, and they're probably the people you want to see anyway. And somebody was talking earlier, I think it was Kimberly talking about it earlier, when we went to the neighborhood Christmas party, I made an agreement with my husband, okay, I'm going to stay for a half hour, but a half hour we're going to leave. Now that half hour might be only 15 minutes, it may stretch to 45 minutes, but at least we have an agreement, and that way we have a sense that he can help me, okay, Carol, you need to leave. And so that's been helpful, having him as my support person. I also will arrive when I know the groups could be smaller, if it's a drop-in. Get there early or come at the end. Those are the two times when you're going to have fewer people. Now, the one thing I did find out at the last time is that you may have people who may have imbibed too much at the end. And so that created its own challenges, but it still was a smaller group of people. So, I mean, again, it's balancing those things. But, and then after you've done it, celebrate what you've done. Say, I did it. That's okay. And celebrate what you've done rather than focusing on what you can't do. And when you do that, you'll feel, there is sadness. I still get sad at times for things I can't do anymore. But when I celebrate and look at what I've done, I feel much better. And so give thanks for the small steps that you're able to take rather than focusing on what you can't do. But celebrate and be gentle on yourself. Each of you who are listening, you are a precious person. And be gentle on yourself and give you grace that you're managing each day.
Well, you just touched me right here, Carol.
I know.
And something that I heard that I thought of when I heard you say or consider your purpose. Why are you going? What I also thought of is if your purpose is, or if you're going because you feel like you have to, that your family expects you, maybe that's not as a good enough reason to put yourself through that.
Yeah. If it's just because it's your duty,
Hmm.
um,
Yeah,
have to weigh.
yeah. Good words of wisdom.
Such a powerful speaker. I want to join your church.
I'm retired. It's wonderful.
But I love the little yeses. I remember in the Life Rebalance Chronicles, that was something that a lot of the cast members talked about, the importance of those little yeses. So I want to reiterate what you shared, Carol, about just even if it's 10, if your purpose is to just go, 10 minutes is going to be enough because you went. And then you can go home and celebrate. Yay, I did it. And that little yes will maybe build to 12 minutes and then 15 and so on.
So, Erica, I'm going to ask you a similar question. What do you think is the most important tip you could give to someone who desperately wants to attend an event? And for you, we're talking about more, professional events,
Yeah.
but is afraid that it will be too overwhelming.
Mhm. Mhm. I would say, when it comes to any event that you're going to, regardless if it is a larger event, regardless if it's, kind of like a family or a neighborhood event that Carol was talking about, absolutely ask to be put in touch with the person who's coordinating it or reach out to the person who's coordinating it. Kind of like Carol said, I think um, I'd like to think us professional event planners are fairly nice people, and so we really love to help people, and we know that our job is honestly to ensure that the attendees are enjoying themselves. That is absolutely foremost. My job might be event planner, but really underneath it, it's kind of a customer service centered job. And if somebody reached out to me and asked for either a special accommodation or even just to let me know, hey, this is, I'm coming to this event. This is a bit of a struggle for me. This is what would work for me. I'd be absolutely happy to do everything I could to make it a positive experience for them. And of course, it's a little bit harder when it's on a large scale, maybe if you're going to something that's a couple hundred people. But at the same time, I think as an event planner, we do our best to create accommodations that we think are going to serve, not only the full audience, but definitely the smaller audience too that might be made of that has some areas that they could use some accommodations for. But at the same time, sometimes we just don't know what we don't know, and so bringing that to our attention or letting us know what could be done, so it can be and then as a event planner, it could be added to my toolbox. I personally know I'd be really grateful for that conversation and to know, oh, for next time, this last event, somebody came to me and told me that X would be really useful for them. So great. I'm going to see if I can go ahead and weave that into plans for other events as well. So definitely never be afraid to try to find the right person to reach out to, and just let them know what could be useful for you.
Yeah.
I want to echo what Erica said there because I have an annual meeting that I'm required to attend. Now that I'm retired, I can sort of skip it, but it's 1,000 people, and I had to go every year. And so I contacted the coordinator and said, I'm going to need a place to retreat, to take a nap every day. How can I do that? And they made the arrangements. I mean, I have what I call my knapsack. I mean, it's got my pillow, it's got my blankie, but I take that with me. And and even when the coordinator changed, they've been willing to talk with the convention center where the meeting is. And my attitude's always been is if I don't ask, the answer is no.
Mhm.
Sometimes if I ask, the answer is no, but most of the time, people are going to try to accommodate. but we have to take the initiative. So I think what you said there, Erica, was so true and helpful. And I'm thank you for the way that you work to accommodate the guests coming to your events.
Yeah.
That's very gracious of you, and I thank you for that.
Absolutely. No, happy to do it. You know, events are for everyone, as they should be. So
Yeah.
Well, thank you both for sharing your expertise and your words of wisdom. I learned a lot that I can take to support my mother in family events. I know that one of the things that we do for my mom, who has Meniere's vestibular migraine and BPPV, is we plan smaller family gatherings rather than having everyone get together. We'll just have this weekend is for me and my sister and my mom, and we're going to go to a cabin where it's just the three of us, so it'll be quiet. But we're thinking in advance, what can we do to support our loved one? And so I hope that those of you who are listening who are patients will that these tips were useful to you, and that you'll share this with your family members as well, so that maybe they'll learn something.
And I know I'm not alone in the vestibular community. We have a fantasy that someday there will be an in-person Vita gathering. And Carol will be there, and Erica, you will plan the perfect in-person gathering. I'm saying this out loud, so if any donors are listening, I think it would just be so fabulous we have all of these events, and you guys do such a beautiful job, Vita does. But to be able to just share a 3-day weekend with all of our favorite humans would be just, something that we would all remember for our lifetime. So maybe someday.
All right, we'll put it on the wish list.
It's going to be if it's a 3-day event, we still need a day before to get ready and a day after to finish.
Right.
But I want to say thank you to Cynthia and all the Vita staff and volunteers. You have been such an excellent resource for me, a source of information and support, a source of encouragement. I am just blessed by what Vita has done, and so I just want to publicly say thank you. And Kimberly, the Life Rebalance Chronicles, I have watched more than once. They have all been inspiring and helpful, and I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Carol. And I'm gonna reflect it back to you that you and people like you are the reason that we are here doing what we do, and it's a true honor to hear from you and to have you be part of our community. So thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope everyone learned something new today, and catch us next time on our next episode of the ICU podcast. Thanks for tuning in to ICU this month.
We hope this conversation sparked new understanding of the vestibular journey. And for all of our patients out there, leaves you feeling just a little more heard and a little more seen. I see you.